Kaz, thanks so much for coming on the show to talk to us today about your journey to the United States, to building a company, all that type of stuff. Everything you've done, it's actually quite remarkable what you've built with Treasure Data. How did your journey begin? How did you get into all this?
Sure. So when I was in university, I majored in computer science, and my professor has built the world's fastest supercomputer at that time. So 500,000 computers combined into one system and running a lot of simulation programs on top of it. I was a part of the team to build the file system for that supercomputer that processes a ton of data. That gave me an opportunity to, one, realize the power of data, and two, opportunity to democratize the power of the data, because the supercomputer can be only used by the government, but the data was exploding everywhere, right? So I was 25. I couldn't speak any English, but nothing to lose. So I come from Japan to Silicon Valley, start the software company together with my two co-founders. And we were just 3 people, but now we have more than 100 million plus ARR, annual recurring revenue, with 700 people plus across many countries. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, let's go deeper on like what you mean by democratizing data.
Of course. Yeah, so, last 10 years, we observed a ton of data gets generated, right? But, what we observed is, okay, the amount of data is exploding, but the talent and skill set who can handle that data is only limited, right? And also, if you go back to when we started the company like 12 years ago, there was not sufficient tools to process the data, right? You have to buy a bunch of hardware, expensive software, setting up a network. You need a bunch of PhD to start processing the data. But around that time, the evolution of the cloud just came in. So our original idea is, instead of buying all these software and hardware, expensive ones, why don't we actually provide the data analytics stack in the cloud so that people can just start consuming it and then start analyzing the data immediately. And at that time, we pitched this idea to many of the investors. They thought it's bad idea, because they are like, okay, who will throw away the data to the cloud? But I guess now everyone does. So I think we ride on that cloud trend really well.
When you came to the United States, you didn't know English. Which is,
I couldn't.
And now you speak better English than I do. How was that? What was that like? What inside of you was like, yeah, I can do this. I can come to the United States. And by the way, you've become like one of the most successful entrepreneurs. Like it's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, it was quite a journey. When I come here, I was really afraid to pick up the phone with English too, right? So calling with PG&E, open up the internet, I had a lot of struggle, right? And but at the same time, I was really aspired of building, global software company. I started my first company when I was 21st, and it was all like in Japan, right? So we scaled from 5 people to 40 people within 5 years. It was okay. But then I had an opportunity to work with Silicon Valley based company who scaled from 5 people to 500 people in 3-4 years. And I was like, okay, I need to be here to start and scaling the global software company. So, it's like, okay, when you play baseball, you want to play in MLB. It's like, if you're a software guy, you have to be in Silicon Valley, especially an entrepreneur, right? So without thinking too much deeply, I came here. And, we pitched a lot of investors. They, of course, realized I cannot speak English. In fact, one of our angel investors, Bill Tai, actually said yes to our pitch. And he decided to put a couple hundreds of thousands of dollars He's actually angel investor for Zoom, for example, or
Oh, wow.
Canva, right? Really well-known angel investor. But then I actually couldn't understand what he said, but my co-founder did. And after the meeting, I asked my co-founder, "Hey, it looks like the meeting went well. How was it?" And my co-founder here is like, cause he actually said yes to our investment, right? So there's a lot of funny story, but long story short, for the first few years, I took English lesson for almost an hour and a half every single day. So spend a lot of time just to catch up the life here.
What has it been like to scale from like, just 2 to 3 people in the company to as big as you are now? 100 million ARR is no joke.
Yeah, I mean, of course we had a lot of luck, right? A lot of people ended up supporting us, For example, Jerry Yang, who is the founder of Yahoo search engine, actually helped us, scaling the company. We had an amazing investor too. I think what worked out really well is, when we started the company, every day they're like, oh, there's a competitor coming out from like ex-Google employee, ex-Facebook employee. Oh, the group of computer scientists from Stanford came out and then pursuing similar idea. And we were a group of people who come from nowhere. We didn't have a lot of background working for like a large tech company, right? So no track record. And, after 10 years, a lot of competitors are gone, right?
Right.
And I think when it comes to, why this is happening, we really focus on customers, right? We listen what they want. They guided and navigated us in the market, right? And we really build our product and business for them, not like we're trying to build ourselves and then let them use it, right? So the customer obsession really mattered last 10 years, and it will be for the next 10 years too.
How are you preparing for, just the economic uncertainty that, everyone's talking about heading into 2023? And also, like, what advice would you have for other companies and other tech companies on kind of how to future proof their business?
Yeah, it's a great point. I just had a company all hands and I was telling this story. Great companies are building or gets built in the difficult times, right? Google and Amazon survived this dot-com bubble. A lot of company gets built during 2008 recession. What we're doing is it's just like adapting to the change, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Charles Darwin, but the most stringent species, it's someone who can adjust, right? And what we're doing is, for example, we're selling the product into mostly the marketing division. And obviously for the next year, they got a lot of budget cut, right? Which puts our business into a little bit of risk. But
Mm-hmm.
what is happening, interestingly, is they're also increasing the investment into data and analytics because every CEO now is asking about, okay, how is our marketing campaign going, right? Is any campaign providing positive ROI or negative ROI, right? So
Right.
everything needs to be measured. So I actually think for the technology, recession actually helped drive the growth. At the same time, it's also true that many of CEOs actually also consolidating a lot of technologies, right? Okay, for example, in Treasure Data, I have 180 SaaS tools available, or using, and we're actually consolidating into 130, right? So if your tool or business is not providing the actual business value, you will be consolidated or getting rid of it, right?
Yeah.
So focus on what matters, bringing in customer value. That really matters in this recession. And the stronger company or companies solving core problems or core hardcore business problem will only survive in this incoming economic uncertainty and then possible recession.
Do you feel like we're in a period where focus is going to really, really matter for companies and leaders? Whereas previously we had the luxury of maybe being able to try various things within our companies or within our various organizations. But now it seems like focus is the name of the game. And if you're not focused and really focused, internally on, your operations and also like how you're serving your customer, I don't think you get away with what was previously happening.
Yeah. I mean, I would say focus has been the most important thing for a startup because, big companies are everywhere. Well, you can only win if you have a focus and win the niche market and then start expanding, right? I think what has happened for the last 20 years or so for the tech company is, sometimes money becomes commodity. Everyone could have raised, ton of money, and then, everyone is becoming unicorn, right? But what we're seeing is because of inflation, federal rate going up, we're seeing a lot of compression in the company's valuation. So some company actually raised the valuation for more than, let's say, $1 billion, 100x of your revenue size, and now it's corrected into 8x, which puts us into very difficult position for them that you have to grow additional 10x or 12x to sustain your valuation, or you become profitable, right?
Right.
And a lot of CEOs and companies, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, okay, let's focus on it. I think for someone, I actually came from like the foreign countries, or my parents was actually running the little pharmacy business. They have been always profitable, right? So I was like, okay, those Silicon Valley companies were always losing the money, but still getting a lot of valuation. And it's also true that investor liked the growth and fastest pace of acquiring the market. But the climate changes and now it's different. They want profitability, right? So for Treasury's Data's case, we've been always about frugal, and then, one part of our business is actually profitable, one part of our business is not, where we think it's the growth area, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a business practice where you spend $1, you need to make more, right? And, it was not the case because investor all wanted the growth, but now it's profitability. But it will flip also probably after the recession. We come out from recession, right? So I think CEO needs to adjust like how much you're investing in the circumstance of the economy.
I think one of the things that must be interesting for you being in the data business is the risk of data breaches, data privacy, and all of those types of things. How do you think about data privacy, and what would you have our listeners and viewers know about it?
Sure. So 10 years ago, we had a lot of evolution in the big data technologies, ability to collect and process ton of data by using thousands or sometimes millions of cheap machines, right? And then I think the sentiment gets changed last few years. So consumers are now really worried about how their data gets used, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Europe has implemented this law called GDPR.
Mm-hmm.
California now has implemented its own privacy law called CCPA. 150 countries out of 200 countries now have like consumer data protection laws, right? So it's not big data era anymore where you collect everything about your consumers, use the data wherever you want. It's like you have to get the consent from the users, how the data gets collected and use the data along with it, right?
Yeah.
So to do that, you need to have a sophisticated management of the collecting the consent data, also customer data and then consumer data merging together. And that's also what we do as a company, Treasure Data. We provide CDP, customer data platform. On one end, we will democratize the use of customer data in the enterprise. Two, we will provide a tool, and we need to be a custodian of that data as well. We don't want our customers and brands to abuse the consumer data, right? So you always need to think about this ethical use of the data.
Being a venture-backed company, how do you think about exits, going public, all of those types of things that were just happening at such an insane pace, maybe like 3 years ago? How do you think about all of that now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a venture-backed company, VC is a business. They want outcome. They want exit, right?
Right.
But there are certain things you can't really control, which is macroeconomy, right? So IPO window got shut down last year. More than 100 plus, or maybe hundreds of companies went public. In tech sector, like software, there's only 2 this year, right?
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
it's being rumored that IPO window will be shut it down for the next year, or at least like 6 months to 9 months, right? But obviously, VC wants to have an exit at some point, right? So, I mean, for the CEO, it's really, you have to create the roadmap and outcome for the investor. But at the same time, I feel like we need to create like a mid-term, long-term thinking, right? If the company grow like 10x from now, let's say, we become like $1 billion ARR company at some point, IPO is just a milestone, not the goal.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So company has to build the long time, sustainable growth engine rather than, okay, we'll make up some number for the IPO and done, right? That doesn't happen.
How has your leadership changed from when you were an early stage startup with just like a few employees to now where you're such a big company? How has your leadership style changed? How has your culture changed within the company?
Yeah, I learned a lot. Obviously I was, 25 and then I never ever worked for larger company than Treasure Data. And that will be true for the future, right? And I would say my biggest learning is just having many, great talent, right? So my leadership style is like having, someone who is better than you. And the best scenario is they are bringing in lots of ideas and I'll just pick it up because based on the market, the trend and customers, right?
Yeah.
Instead of I'm telling them what to do, right? And I think it's just a realization. And, I had a, let's say, interesting story where, I graduated University of Tokyo. And when I started this company, who actually has the highest knowledge of database in my network? And he was a, professor at the university. So I actually asked him to join the company for 3 years. And then later on, he joined.
Uh-huh.
And he's now a core engineering, he's a part of a core engineering team to process like trillions of records every day, right? So just hiring and building great talent, gathering the best mind of the world, that's my job rather than, I'm trying to do by myself, right? So that's quite a lot of change from just 3 people do everything by yourself. And then now 700 people, my job is just to really, attract the right talent, right?
Yeah, speaking of talent and recruiting, you mentioned like, hey, if you want to build a world-class tech company, you have to be in Silicon Valley when you first moved to the United States. I wonder if you still think that is true, if being in Silicon Valley is still helpful on the recruiting front. Because as you know, like, there's so much migration away from Silicon Valley, or at least it's talked about a lot, going to like Miami or Austin or these other places. How do you think Silicon Valley is changing? And what do you think the future of what was for sure the mecca of technology, where do you think that stands now?
Yeah, so 10 years ago, when we started raising the money, a lot of capital for the tech is really centralized here.
Yeah.
right, in Silicon Valley. So it was almost a must to be here,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And then as you talk, like after pandemic, a lot of people get decentralized, right? So there's a few perspectives. First of all, investors are more willing to invest remotely, right? Although, of course, recently it kind of shifted back to the point where, they want to beat, right?
Hmm.
So we see more opportunity abroad, but it's also true that, Silicon Valley in San Francisco area still has the highest probability of getting the investment. So if I were a founder, desperately wants to build something with the VC-backed model, I would be here because it has a higher chance. Now, when it comes to the talent, there's 2 points. For the business side, right? Sales, marketing, operation, G&A, there's a lot of talent here who scale the business to 0 to 10 million to 30 million to 100 million and a billion, right?
Hmm.
And then for each stage, you actually need different set of skill set and people, right? People who really likes figuring out first product market fit to scaling to like managing multiple business lines. That's a very different skill set. But there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley who has done that in the previous generations, right? So if you look at the SaaS industry, software as a service I'm in, well, for example, like someone like Salesforce, Adobe, LinkedIn, Dropbox, those type of talent, especially on the business side and executive, they're all in
Hmm.
Silicon Valley, right? So that I'm convinced that, to highly attract the talent, especially on the executive level, I think SF area is better equipped. Now on the R&D, engineering side, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So, our engineering team is highly distributed with this open source model. Everyone can contribute to any software, right? And then the best talent is everywhere. So having this like highly remote, asynchronous, high performing engineering team is really the trend. Although, of course, you might want to have some core locations, right? For us, it's, Silicon Valley, Tokyo, London, and Vancouver,
Hmm.
right? And but I mean, my point is, I think the engineering talent tends to be more distributed than the business talent.
One of the things we believe at CEO.com is the chances you give are just as important as the chances you take. And so many of us in our lives were given incredible chances that have led us to where we are today, and without which maybe we wouldn't be where we are today. Who has given you a chance in your career and in your life?
Yeah. So, a lot of so it was interesting. I was a little bit stranger in my age group, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated computer science from Japan. I was the only one who has joined and starting the startup. Everyone else joined a large company, right? So I didn't have anyone who I can ask for the help for the businesses. So I have, a lots of executives in the Japanese software ecosystem, maybe 10 years and 20 years older than me. They actually invited me to a lot of groups and meetups and then connecting with me about many, people, right? So one of the people, a person who is called Masaki, he's almost like my teacher, but he's now a CTO of the entire Japan government,
Oh, wow.
right? So he actually changed my life where he actually connected with many of technology leaders in Japan. That changed my life. And Bill Tai, who is the founder, sorry, investor for Canva and also Zoom, I talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
He invested into someone who even couldn't speak any English, right? So I really, cannot thank more enough. And Jerry Yang, who is the founder of Yahoo, he is also the one who invested into us as an angel investor, gave a lot of critical business advices without a lot of bias. We were no one, right? he also admit that, okay, Kaz and Hiro, who is my co-founder, you're no one in Silicon Valley. You're the underdog. And you have a lot of people who comes out from all these like large company have an advantage, but you have to act like an underdog and be hungry about the success, right? And Dan Scheinman, who is on the board of Zoom and also various other tech companies, has given us a lot of business and investment advices. He's one of the, was one of the best angel investor base too. So there's a lot of people who have supported us.
What's the future of Treasure Data? What does it look like 5-10 years from now?
Yeah. So if you look at the potential of Treasure Data, it's really exciting. So we provide the solution called CDP, Customer Data Platform, right? And our main buyer is Global 2000 or large enterprise. And if you look at the Global 2000, which is basically top 2000 biggest company on the earth, we only have like 50 of them right now, somewhere around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we already achieved $100 million ARR, annual recurring revenue. So we have 1,950 to go, which is 40x from now. We're going to have some work, right? And according to IDC, 50% of Global 2000 company will adopt CDP in next 2 to 3 years. So it's all opportunity, right? And from other number I can give it to is there's 8 billion people on the earth and 4.5 billion people are internet connected. So through the brands we have as a customer, 450, we have majority of that internet connected population's data. Although we don't own, we provide a system to process that data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of the employee at Treasure Data have an impact to make billions of people's life happier, safer, and more convenient through the data. But at the same time, we need to be a custodian of that data. We need to protect the data, honoring the privacy, right? So that's just an opportunity we have. So if you think about like 5 years and 10 years, right? We have 1,950 companies to go, and that's a lot of work and opportunity.
That's beautiful, man. Hey, thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your story, sharing your advice with our community. It means a lot. Kaz, what an honor to have you here. I'm sure we'll talk again at some point. Best of luck with Treasure Data and everything else you're doing.
Thanks for having me, Clint.